No, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, my topic today is security with the Internet of Things. And this is a kind of a unique and fun area because it's one of the few technologies where we kind of started off and we said, yikes, there's going to be some problems with this. It's also been something that's been talked about for a number of years, even before it was a reality. The connected home and the different concepts that were tried out over the last few decades in making different versions of this a reality. Well, now we're seeing a huge growth in Internet of Things, and also the concern on how are we going to protect the data that's processed by these devices and the systems that are connected to them. First, IoT, I've heard a couple of other interpretations of this. The insecurity of things, or the Internet of Threats. So I thought I'd at least include them in here. And that's a good thing, that we're thinking of the security challenges behind it. Just an overview of what I'm going to talk about. First, just give you an overview of IoT and some of the uses and things that are out there. And then talk about some of the challenges, and lastly, go through what are some of the strategies that are employed in developing IoT apps, in supporting them and implementing them. So questions are definitely encouraged. We'll have some time at the end, or if there's something that's pressing, don't want you to forget it, so go ahead and ask. And with that, here's some statistics. Now, I know this screen is a little bit small. Can everybody read it? Can you see it? And can you also hear me? Okay, good. Great, so some stats here, 93% of IoT early adopters are concerned about IoT security. Kind of what I was talking about here at the beginning, that IoT entered and people were already saying, yikes, there's going to be some security problem with connecting every little thing that we own to the internet or to the cloud. 6.4 billion devices today. And we're adding, these numbers are kind of astounding, 5.5 million a day. And 85% of enterprises intend to deploy IoT devices, but only 10% feel confident in the security of those devices. So where's IoT used? I'm going to give you some examples here. What happened there? I need an IoT projector. Can anybody have one? It'll auto track, like the camera here. Okay, so first we have camera systems, and I like to highlight that first because we've seen a lot of the different denial of service and other attacks using those camera systems. Cars, and the threats on cars have been well publicized, but there's car apps with very minimal security. These are the applications that allow you to do things like, hey, unlock your car or start your car remotely. And then the applications that are available for, let's say, Android or iOS had huge security flaws in them. Many of the vulnerabilities that were identified within the car systems themselves, using unencrypted credentials, yikes, lack of integrity checks, and outdated protocols. I guess the good news for us right now is that few have been actually exploited, but we're all obviously concerned. And not only the monetary value of a car, but because, hey, we're driving in it and we could get injured or killed. So this is the type of thing that really gets us worried. So what are we going to do about that? Here are some of the other things. In factories, we're seeing a lot of use of IoT in putting sensors over the different devices to track how consumption of raw materials or problems that might happen in expensive machines, or for robotic systems. We have these smart meters that are implemented at, you may have one on your house, collecting information on your water usage or your power usage. And then the whole smart home concept. Eventually, and my microwave is going to be able to tell me exactly how long I should cook something based on the barcode I scan, or something like that. For me, I couldn't give a toot about whether or not my microwave can. I don't want it to connect to my refrigerator or do anything else. Yeah, it doesn't seem like something I desire. And that's probably why they've been talking about it for a couple decades, and still nobody's buying a connected microwave. But we do see lots and lots of connected devices, connected thermostats. That's been one item. And then we also see animals and humans. This is the point where I've been at different conferences, and they all want to talk about IoT. And some of the examples out there have been, the IoT where they attach sensors to bees, and then would monitor how they move around about in the hive, and where they're collecting the honey, and all kinds of other things. So they're sticking sensors on animals, and then I say humans here too, because we have cardiac sensors or other things that might be either inside your body or wearable on us that are monitoring us as humans and collecting that data. And lastly, the toys. Oh, we all love our toys, and sometimes we're giving them to our kids, and they're connected to the internet, to the cloud. They're storing a lot of data. They're collecting a lot of data. Sometimes it's so that they can learn. They can better communicate. There was that robot that came out that can have fairly intelligent conversations with you, and the more people who own this thing, the more it learns about how to converse and how to even sort of empathize, because it has facial expressions, if anybody remembers the robot that I'm talking about. And so it's all using the cloud in order to make each robot better. And so some of these toys are to learn. Others to exchange data with friends. There was the puppies, where you could talk to them and it would send messages to another puppy, and that puppy would then talk to your friend. So now as kids who are talking to each other using these stuffed animals essentially. Other attempts to obtain software updates, or to allow you to customize your product online. Log into the website, make a bunch of customizations. Now we don't have to have a lot of buttons on our toy. And then lastly, to obtain some data on your surroundings in order for it to be aware of, let's say, restaurants that are nearby, or how to get from one place to another with the GPS location data. We also see that these toys are targeted because, hey, we can get data on the users, and these are children, so it's a bigger importance there. Also, used for surveillance, since some of them are recording audio or video. We have the nanny cams that were hacked. Similar to that, they're used for surveillance, and then also good information for thieves. If you have some valuables around the house, that these thieves can try to figure out, when you're home, where you're going, and whether your house is an ideal location to steal from. So I'm going to talk about the different challenges. I kind of broke them up into different categories here based on how they're used. So we have IoT being used for distributed denial of service, IoT being used for ransomware, so lock out your device with ransomware once it gets infected, for surveillance and backdoors, data breaches, and IoT botnets. And there's, of course, some overlap here. There's botnets that are used for distributed denial of service, but I wanted to try to give a good overview of what are some of the challenges that we do have to address when implementing IoT. First one here would be distributed denial of service. We've seen some attacks, especially the latter part of 2016, when we had all the home routers and the IP cameras that were used for the distributed denial of service attacks on quite a few different major companies, exploiting the DNS. And then in September, so actually I should have said September and then October, this showed in our last one, but LVH, faced with that big distributed denial of service attack, also was based off of CCTV cameras. And then, hey, let's toss out Krebs on security here, right? He posts all kinds of great things on security, and his site was, he had Akamai protecting it, but it still got hit with a distributed denial of service. Of course, that's a blog versus some other major sites. I know a lot of people visit his site, but it's still not like an eBay. But we're getting a lot of distributed denial of service. Using these devices are very easy to hack because they have typically default credentials on them, or they may have firmware that's not updated very often. And so, it's 75% of global organizations victims of a DDoS attack. Tons of them happen every day, 3,700. And malicious code for DDoS botnets has been found on 600,000 devices. Now, if we think back, what do we have? We have billions of devices out there. I want to put this in perspective, because sometimes these numbers can seem You get a lot of large numbers and they're tossed out at different times in a presentation. You say, wow, that's a lot. But we had billions of devices out there, so this is 600,000. Do you want to put it in context? Some of the effects, I think we're all pretty familiar with DDoSs by now. We know what they do. Shut down a website, make it unavailable for a time. Sometimes used as a portion of attack to shut down the website, and then or a system when it starts coming back up to exploit vulnerabilities in the startup routine or prior to certain services becoming available to then utilize that as an entry point. Sometimes to cover up data exfiltration. So these are all different uses of DDoS. And it's so popular. I was at a conference last year when I was talking to an individual who ran a number of different, he was responsible for security for a number of different universities in New York. And he said, oh yeah, now there used to be the day when the student didn't want to take a test and they would pull a fire alarm, right? And now they go online and they pay for a DDoS attack on the university. Like, whoa, it's that simple. You don't have to have any knowledge. You simply say, hey, I want to attack this. And wherever the botnet happens to be, it could be on compromised PCs or it could be on now our compromised IOT devices, but gives them a large herd in order to attack from. Some of the defense strategies, you have these devices that are on your network or on some segment. One thing we could do is do some vulnerability scanning on them, detect what some of these possible vulnerabilities are, and then try to protect against those. Unfortunately, we are a bit limited with these IoT devices because none of us are actually going to develop our own custom firmware for it. So you have to rely on the manufacturer, or put some pressure on the manufacturer in order to release their firmware that's going to remediate those vulnerabilities. Now, in some cases, there's a compensating control we could implement that will help mitigate that vulnerability, and so it's good to be aware of what vulnerabilities are present in these devices. Is there a firmware that's available for it to address that vulnerability? And if not, then what kind of compensating controls can I put in place in order to mitigate that? So another thing to do also is when you're selecting these, a client was asking me about cameras the other day. We looked at a few different models, and there were a significant number of vulnerabilities that were discovered for one of the models. And when you look at the vendors' firmware release notes and the track record of how they're patching this device, it did not look good. They weren't addressing these vulnerabilities quickly at all. And so that compared to another vendor that was releasing updates very quickly after they were discovered was a much better bet, because long term you can kind of expect the same type of behavior out of that vendor. So before you get locked into purchasing a lot of devices, you may want to check and see what kind of track record do they have in terms of not only their end user support, but in terms of this the remediation of discovered vulnerabilities. And then once you actually buy the device, hey, let's change those default credentials. I know I'm speaking about some really basic stuff here, but unfortunately these are the typical things that we see so often. Devices that they're purchased, they're stuck on a network, and hey, they're doing their job, right? So you don't touch them anymore. Unfortunately, yeah, you're using default credentials, really poor passwords, or their firmware's never updated. And one other thing we can do is, hey, if we're not using the feature, let's at least turn it off. You can also put some of these devices on their own network, segment them off from the world. But segmentation alone, you also still need to have other security controls in place in front of them. Talking to a person who has implemented a lot of cameras, and they said, oh, well, we isolated them onto a different network, and there's no firewall, there was nothing in front of it, and they still were exchanging. They had a password that is assigned to the device that they're using elsewhere. So I was like, well, you're going to run into some pretty big problems. Ransomware, and I love the next slide here. This one. Has anybody seen this one? It's been floating around the net for a while. Oh, okay. Well, I just love this comic. So you see all the different devices, and unfortunately, for all of you in the back row, you probably can't read it. But it has your different devices here in the kitchen, and they've all been affected with ransomware. And so your fridge is saying, hungry? pay up and I'll unlock the door. Or your microwave says, on strike until you send money to my hackers. The coffee maker, 20 bucks in my PayPal account, and or I'll only brew decaf. Yeah. The toaster says, I'll be burning toast if you don't get me some dough. Here's your home security system out here. It says next time you leave, it costs you 100 bucks to get back into the house unless you give me $75 now. And we got the other security system says my alarm system is going to go off randomly throughout the night unless you donate. Our smoke detector, 30 bucks in Bitcoin, or next time I smell smoke, I might just let you sleep. And your thermostat, I'm turning off the heat until you warm up my bank account. Now, this one here was just total joke, right? We got the IoT broom. What are we using the IoT broom for? I have no idea. I mean, I guess I could think of one thing, like maybe it would tell you, like, you know, how efficient you are in sweeping and how you might be able to improve your stroke. It's like an IoT golf club, right? And this one just says, give me $25 or I'll tell everyone on your social network that you were stupid enough to buy an internet-connected broom. Yeah. The keys here, I'll start your car, but only take you to the bank to make a transfer. And then here's the Roomba or other, you know, internet-connected vacuum. Wire my hacker $100 or I'll reverse my motor and blow dirt all over the place. And the last one was the trash. If you don't send us the cash, your reputation will be in the trash. But you know, I think of all these different devices, the more devices we're connecting, and now what else is the risk if we didn't have that device? So something becomes unavailable. Certainly that was a risk for the cars, but we see the risk here for all these other devices. And it kind of drives the point home that, you know, ransomware already is infecting our PCs. And we have a backup, we restore that. It's a little bit harder for some other devices. For some of these, you might be able to simply download a firmware and you know, reflash it. There might not be much configuration on it. In other cases, they may actually corrupt that firmware and make the device inoperable completely until you use some you know, their own firmware load method. Have we seen this actually in the wild? No. No, we haven't. It's still been fairly simple. But it does present that risk. You know, how are we going to protect these devices, especially from something like ransomware, now that could make those devices offline? How about using ransomware or some other attack to take the camera system offline while then you go and do something within the organization? We had ransomware, the cameras were offline, we don't know what happened during that time frame. We know of all those cameras in Washington, D.C. that were offline for quite a while due to an attack on those. Everybody familiar with that one? They were down for like 2 weeks, I think it was, right prior to the inaugural address. So really not a ton of news on ransomware and IoT. There was a hotel in Austria that had its system compromised, locked out the guests from the rooms until ransom was paid. You got to have, you know, the system has to be in place in enough. And here was the hotel. You know, enough companies before it's going to be a huge target for the ransomware authors, and also. They have to have some reasonable assurance that you're not going to have another way to, you know, get those guests into their hotel room. So, you know, there's still limited utility on some of these. Why are some of them easy targets? Because they may be using some version of Linux, sometimes an quite outdated version of Linux to base it on. I'm not saying that Linux is a poor platform. I love Linux, but just when you're using something old. Or Android, and there's been a ton of exploits for Android, and that's where we also see the TVs. We're going to cover that a little bit later. The TV is running Android, but then they're susceptible to all the same Android attacks we see on other devices. And unfortunately, they may be running something quite old. So they say it's Android enabled, you don't know which version, and maybe behind the scenes it's running something old like, you know, 4.0 or 4.4, or, you know, one of those versions. And then there's plenty of exploits available for it. Software updates with these, depending on the vendor, just how often they're actually releasing a patch and whether or not you're downloading. Some of these will have the ability to auto-update, and so they're updating on a regular schedule. That's great. In other cases, you're the one who has to monitor it, get the release note, check it, go through change management, implement it. So there's, you got to make sure that it's part of the process. And then we've already mentioned the credential part. Some statistics on ransomware itself. All the different types of ransomware, we've seen a huge increase in ransomware. See, over 400% increase. This was actually a 2016 stat, so 400% increase in 2016 over 2015, and we've seen a huge increase here into the beginning of 2017 as well, partially because it's been such a lucrative model for the attackers, or would I say extortionists, that they've been able to plow more and more money into the development of better ransomware and now exploit more and more individuals. In some cases, there's more competition in the ransomware market as well. We've seen some new entrants that have been charging less. Don't know if you're familiar with there was the Spora one that it gives you different options. Says you can decrypt 2 files for free just to demonstrate that we can decrypt them, and then you can decrypt I think it's 5 or 10 files for $30, or you can do the whole hard drive, or and then there's the immunization option. We won't hack you again for I think it was $20. So they have all these different things. Which one do you want from our menu of options? Trying to get every little buck they can. From the person who can't afford to decrypt everything, well then decrypt a few files. The paid in Bitcoin, the evolution of cryptocurrencies has certainly made online sort of cybercrime a lot easier, because it's a lot easier to then launder the money. We used to have quite an infrastructure in order to move money from one place to another, and with cryptocurrencies, it makes that a lot easier with Tor and other anonymizers. The cyber criminals are able to use the same things we would use in order to try to protect ourselves, to protect themselves from investigations. So some high-value targets, we've seen banks and hospitals, universities and government agencies. All of these have been big targets of ransomware itself. Now, depending on how they implement IoT, we could also see the IoT in hospitals. We've seen a number of attacks on their PCs, but we see IoT being used in hospitals for, let's say, the cardiac sensors, or for some of the carts with equipment on them. And so if those things are disabled, then it makes it harder for the hospital to do its job. Patient lives are at stake. The extortionists realize, yeah, we've got a higher chance that we're going to get our money. Hopefully they have backups, they have alternate equipment they can use. Those are different types of things we'd have to plan for. What's our contingency plan if we do have the ransomware? Do we have an effective backup strategy? Can we restore within our recovery time objective, recovery point objective, and can we do so effectively? Surveillance. This is a lovely one that we've heard about recently, right? With the CIA. Got Android devices, and I mentioned the Android TV, but they're easily very vulnerable based on the version that they're using. And many of these, the TV can be off, but the actual the microphone could be still functional. My parents they put in a brand new Sony TV that had one of those remotes with the voice response, not response, with the voice activation and all that on it. And the first question I got was, now, will somebody be able to monitor me on this? And I said, yeah, I'm sure they can. This is so we don't have to connect it, but you got the thing. So even when it's off, that mic could be functioning. And then, a few weeks later, I'm like, hey, guess what? We definitely know that they have the tools. CIA's tools, Weeping Angel monitors conversations from the TVs. And then there was malware that could be injected into different types of routers to do surveillance there as well. Some of these tools are shipped directly with, are not shipped with the devices, but have to be installed with physical media. So that's one limiting factor on some of the surveillance methods. But we've also seen when we get to phones that some of these phones were actually shipped with malware on them, pre-existing. Yikes! And so I liked this one here. You may have seen this floating around the internet with how you get the little stickers you can put over your camera at everywhere. You could just grab any sticker. You could cover up the camera if you're not going to use it. Mark Zuckerberg has covered up his camera and his microphone port here. Obviously, hey, he was concerned about somebody hijacking his PC and hearing what he's saying or seeing, what he's doing there at Facebook. So we could be just as concerned about, this is his PC, but about other IoT devices. If you're not using some feature on it, hey, you could simply, cover it up or destroy that part of it if you're definitely never going to use that feature, disable it, and then it's not available to the attackers. Some surveillance news. FDA announced that cardiac monitoring devices had found vulnerabilities allowing them to be hacked. What can we do to your cardiac monitoring device? Can we take your data? What about if you had a pacemaker that was internet enabled? Can we turn it off? Can we change it? Can we raise your heart rate? Things like that. This one's not a pacemaker, but just a monitoring device. But still, that data is health data is now accessible. And then the CIA hacking tool documentation, of course. Some of the artificial intelligence systems that are out there now are connected to our mobile devices or to your Alexa or other devices that are sitting around in your home. Right now, it certainly seems convenient to be able to just say, Alexa, play my music, do whatever. I don't actually have Alexa, so whatever the commands are for it, that's the difficult part with me. I don't remember the commands. So I'm like, Alexa, do something. Whatever, tell me what you can do. And it doesn't respond. So, but Siri, Alexa, Cortana, all of these systems, they're going back into the cloud and they're relying on pretty advanced artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms that enable them to do the natural language processing and then to conduct whatever activity you want them to do it behind the scenes. And that's mostly workflow. But the fact that that we have different pieces of information that's collected on Cortana, you have location information, you have voice print, and other information that's collected behind the scenes that then could be harvested, could be available for exploitation. We've seen people talk about the fingerprints used for iPhones and trying to replicate those. That there's the more data we're collecting and the more we're using these devices, the more personal they get. Also, that means that it has to be able to interact in that level. And now it's another potential exploit method. This is the guy, Pierre Dirks. He has collected tons of footage, and he does have permission to display this footage. And this is, sorry, a couple of these, I guess it does look cool that they're animated GIFs. I didn't actually realize they'd even show up and here it's animated. But he does a show where he sets up a room that actually looks kind of like the room that you're looking at. And he has permission to show these videos, but these videos were obtained from either systems of people they didn't realize that they were sitting online with a public IP address, or ones that were very easily hacked. And then the webcams were made public and just out there for anybody to see. And so he has this setup where you can sit in the room that looks like that one and watch these videos, and it just makes you feel really creepy. And you realize, yikes, I need to check and make sure that my DVR system that I deployed or my camera system is not out there broadcasting just like all these. And it's real. And there's tons of devices that are out there that are just simply broadcasting or have been hacked and their stream hijacked essentially by those who are out there. And mostly because of things that we've already mentioned. Using those default credentials, there's very simple credentials because they're just sitting out there directly on the net and there's nothing in between them. These are the types of devices that are often hacked. And you see, you could just be a device is sitting outside. You have it coming in right directly into a router or a cable modem. Nothing in between it really. Some are used as backdoors into the rest of the network. 80 different models of Sony cameras were allowing backdoor complete control of the device. VoIP devices with backdoor access. iOS, say, yeah, we have backdoor into, and this is, I wouldn't call this necessarily a backdoor like you typically think of. They're just saying a backdoor into the security of the device, not backdoor into anything connected to it. And then some devices sold with Trojans or ransomware that was already on them. It's like, wow, how does that even happen? These are devices, like, pull out your phone and snap that one, right? in case you have one of these, right? It doesn't mean that all of them had the ransomware on. These were just different devices that were detected. Some of them actually came from the manufacturer with malware on them, pre-existing. How's that happening? I don't know, but we got Samsung devices that are blowing up in our pockets, so I guess I can expect just about anything. Other firmware that had some backdoors in them. You can notice that a number of these are foreign manufacturers. Of course, we produce practically everything from some company in China, right? Rebranded with another company's name on it. So you had some capabilities of sniffing SMS messages, gathering your contact information, recording your location data. So getting a lot of information about you that then is available to attackers to harvest, mine, or use against you. And then IoT used for data breaches. I want to kind of go back to the toys. Okay, we've seen data breaches in some of these children's toys, and that's what it concerns me. I'm a parent, so it concerns me if I'm giving my child one of these little cuddling animals, and then find out that the voice data, that their account information, all that's been compromised. Now, is it a compromise of the actual IoT device? No, not really. They're actually compromising it through the cloud provider. That a number of the attacks that have been on some of these IoT devices and the data, it wasn't really what was stored on the device, because that was actually very little. They were going after the data store, so they were connected into the cloud, or connected into some other system that then was targeted for the attack to collect that data off of all the IoT devices. So part of this is on, as we said, checking the vendors, see if they're reputable, if they're doing the right thing, and how are they implementing their communication on the back end to their cloud or to their other service to collect that data. If you're going to be implementing it yourself, then how are you going to be collecting and storing and processing that data? How will you eventually get rid of that data? So here was a prediction: 500,000 IoT devices would be compromised in 2017. Let's see. Talking in 2018, and we'll see what happens, right? But what we can expect is that as adoption increases, so will the attacks. Right now, IoT, even with the large number of IoT devices that were out there, it's still a small percentage of what it can be. And as that starts building more and more, and as we're more reliant on it, we're going to see a lot more of these attacks take place. And that's why it's important to get some of these security protocols in place now, so that we're well prepared for what happens in the future. So, what can we do? IoT security needs to be a part of the design. It's not, and I say this about everything. Okay? You're going to build something, well, you need to build it with security in mind right now, not add it on at the end. Unfortunately, that when you start talking about what are the objectives, and if there's no person who's spearheading and championing information security or cybersecurity, within the organization, that security ends up happening afterwards, or maybe even after a breach. So the most important thing would be to have that happen right at the beginning. Let's build it into the device. Let's look at each device and examine them for some of those potential vulnerabilities. We've got to know what's out there and know what the potentials are in order to really make a good risk decision. And then let's have a backup system in place. Maybe it's a backup to the device, or it's an entire new device that can be rolled in place in case that device is inaccessible, or in case we find out that we can't use it for some reason. Botnets are a big portion of the DDoS attacks, and as IoT devices are out there, each one is essentially a network node and has a limited amount of processing, but those nodes can be used along with their internet connection in order to launch DDoS attacks, or to do a variety of other things, just like most of the botnets for their PC companions or Macs can do. So here's Mirai. This is a botnet program, and we can see largest breach. Now it seems like almost every breach that comes out is the largest breach in history, because I think we just get more and more devices that are out there are capable of joining the new botnet herds. So source code for this is actually available online and really very simple to use. That's where I was getting down to. You don't have to be technically adept in order to implement some of these things. You just simply need to know who to go to or where to go, and have some money to spend or some time to spend in order to implement some of this. What is a bot? It's basically just a program that's going to be able to perform different tasks. It's, if we looked at different types of malware out there, most of them are, you got worms and viruses and Trojans, and they're built for a specific task, but then after they're released out in the wild, there's no changes. What differentiates a bot from the rest of them is that a bot receives new programming over time, and so now can perform additional tasks. And that's what makes them, so dangerous, because you can now use them in a coordinated fashion. We see tons and tons of bots on unaffected machines. Last year's statistics, it was like almost 50% of the computers out there now recognizes a lot of home PCs and such, but had at least one piece of malware on them, and that bots take up a large percentage of those. And so the bad guys, I call it the botnet, the criminals' cloud. They're using your PC as part of their cloud in order to conduct whatever they're going to do. If it's source or send encrypted communications, bouncing it through their botnet, or use them as a large host for distributed denial service, or sending out spam and other messages. That's what they're hiring it all out for. These were some of the things you could do, or distributed copyrighted material, data mining, collecting the data, sending it out. I'll briefly go through a life cycle because I don't want to jump into whole botnet here, but I just was including it. So, get on the device, exploit it, however that is measured. If it's through some other malicious code or the Trojan that was already on the machine, guessing that password or finding a vulnerability, and then they're going to report back into the command and control server. Say, hey, I've got a device here, and I found a camera, and this camera is connected to this type of network, has this type of connectivity and this bandwidth. So this is what I can do with it, and then it'll be classified by the bot herder and used for different tasks. Then it might preserve itself, and either implement a rootkit or subvert the system so that it's harder to eradicate. And then here do some more inventorying of the device, send that information back to command and control, and then just sit around and wait for instructions. And then once it receives instructions, execute whatever the bot herder had intended for it. Now sometimes it will be given some instructions and then it has to download new code, because since they're typically not packaged with every single thing they can do, they want to keep them as small as possible, especially when you're running on an IoT device. You don't have much to work with. So they just download exactly what it needs to perform that small task, and then it could trash that part of it, clean up and erase the evidence. So what are some of the security strategies, right? We've talked about the threats. They definitely, I think we all feel the weight of it. There's a lot out there. Even though there hasn't been quite as much of implementation of it, we know, yikes, this is going to happen. We need to be prepared. And what are some of the things we can do? Make sure, and so kind of come from a higher level here first. We need to verify that we're going to boot correctly, that we're going to verify our software integrity. If we have digital signature, hopefully with that, with our firmware or our software, that we're going to verify that, and then we're going to start up our security process before we start jumping in onto the network, so that that can't be exploited simply by taking down the device and starting it up in an insecure fashion. Say fail secure, not failing insecure. Access control, we're implementing least privilege. Okay? Only have what you need to have on the device. And then authentication is going to be communicated over the network, so there should be some sort of level of authentication there. Let's determine which devices are real devices, which ones are not our devices, or if there's, if it's rooted, can we determine whether or not that device is the authentic, legitimate copy, or if it has some malicious code on it. And then if you're developing a device, as we mentioned earlier, that we got to have security by design. This is the thing we're thinking of right at the beginning when we're initially designing our IoT solution. Also think, okay, we have our normal people who are going to put convenience before security, most likely. That's at least what I've seen. This seems really cool. Let me implement it. Let me put it out there. And then, oh, whoops, what was the security behind that? Yikes. Okay. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. And then, but also for the attackers who are saying, I want to break into this thing. I want to try to utilize it for some other purpose. You got to think about both of those. and assume my system's going to fail sometime. What are going to be my countermeasures? What am I going to do if it does crash, or if it does get exploited? And then when you're implementing it, one segmentation, let's take these IoT devices and move them off into their own segment of the network, or split them off entirely, having something in front of it, firewall IPS, doing vulnerability scanning on the device, let's find out what vulnerabilities are present, making sure you patch it regularly, and if you don't need the feature, let's disable it, let's turn it off, let's get rid of it, or don't even buy a device that has that type in it. Know where the data is stored, okay? Where's this data going? Is it going to the cloud, or is it going to something you have on premise? How is that going to be secured, and how are we going to manage the life cycle of that data?